This is the second of my reflections on the Camino de Santiago, the pilgrimage from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port across the Pyrenees mountain range to the city of Santiago in northern Spain. A walk of some 780 kilometers, completed in my case over the course of 33 days. As I mentioned in the first installment, my endeavors to rein in my expectations were in the end pointless, because all of my expectations were far exceeded. I dreamed of doing the Camino for a number of years and could never have anticipated how amazing it would be. I'd do it again in a heartbeat and recommend it to all of you. If you've been thinking of doing it, just go and do it. You're going to love it. It's an amazing experience. In my case, of walking together with my Heavenly Father, of times of deep intimacy with Him, of conversation, of simply being together and enjoying the beauty of His creation. What I want to share with you today is going to require some context, a little bit of background story. So I ask that you bear with me so that I can lay a foundation for what I'd like to share. When I arrived after those 33 days in Santiago at the cathedral, I bawled my eyes out. I cried so hard. I actually couldn't speak or talk. I tried to call Nia, tried to FaceTime Nia on my mobile to tell her that I'd have arrived. And I was sobbing so deeply, sobbing so hard, I couldn't even speak. So in the end, I just hung up. In fact, my eldest daughter, Hannah, messaged me and said, "Dad, are you okay? You're not having a heart attack or something, are you?" Now, Father was doing something profoundly deep in my heart, moving and shifting some things that have really changed everything for me. And it's this that I'd like to share with you in this reflection. The inward longing to know who we really are is the source of all our discontent. The inward desire, the hunger to discover our true identity, to discover who we really are, is the source of all of our discontent. It's the source of all of our frustration, all of our restlessness, all of our dis-ease. It's the source of all of our striving. A number of years ago, I was sitting in a church service and the pastor that was preaching asked this question: "What's your dream?" Don't think about it too much. Don't try too hard. What's the first thing that comes to your mind as I ask you this question? What's your dream? All I could see was one word: retirement. And then I thought, oh, that's not really good, is it? That's not really appropriate. I'm the father heart guy. I'm a preacher. I'm a man of God. I'm supposed to be full of joy and life and fully enjoying everything that I'm doing. I thought, oh dear, maybe there's something profoundly wrong. As I reflected on this over the days that followed, what I realized was it wasn't ministry per se that I wanted to retire from. It was everything that went with ministry that I wanted to retire from. Striving, competition, comparison, anger, ungodly ambition, comparing and competing with my peers, trying to be good enough, trying to measure up to some invisible and unobtainable standard. Judging myself, judging others, struggling with condemnation, being so self-centered and self-reliant, trying to find my own way, trying to provide for myself, trying to somehow create a name, create a reputation, trying to become somebody. I can look back now and see how all of those things were rooted in shame, a sense of deep inadequacy within my heart. It's as old as the Garden of Eden. It's as old as Cain and Abel, isn't it? in their case resulting in murder. I could see how all of my life, some 50 years, I've been trying to climb this ladder of being good enough. I've been climbing and climbing and climbing, only to arrive at the top of the ladder and discover there's nothing there. It's hopeless, it's fruitless. But when we think of retirement, it's not only what we're going to stop doing, it's what we're going to start doing. I didn't just want to retire from these things, I wanted to retire into some things as well. There was a deep desire in my heart to find true joy, to retire into joy, to retire into contentment, to retire into a deep sense of peace, of rest, of security. To live from the wisdom of God instead of from my own intellect, from the strength of my own good ideas. To lean into Him, to lean into a place of rest where I could trust Him for everything instead of fighting and striving to find my own way. To be other-centered, to live from an overflow, being able to give out of the abundance of life in my own heart, instead of constantly staring at my own navel and trying to fulfill all of my own narcissistic tendencies, trying to resolve them. It's about this time I was reading through the Gospel of John, which is of course my favourite Gospel, probably yours as well. And I came to the story of the paralysed man at the pool of Bethesda. It's from John chapter 5. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralysed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. I realised as I read this passage, this man is you, Richard. You've been an invalid not for 38 years, you've been an invalid for 50 years. You've been the blind, the lame and the paralysed, living in the hopelessness that this man experienced, living in the frustration that this man experienced of knowing that there was a place of freedom, but not knowing how he could get into that freedom. Who would help him into that place of freedom? You're the man, Richard. You're the one that's been struggling. I think all of us are familiar with what I call self-talk, where we unconsciously talk to ourselves. They're perhaps expressed best in the Bible in Luke chapter 15, the story of the prodigal son. On the one side you've got the younger son who says, you know, I'm not worthy to be your child. I'm not worthy to be called your son. Just make me like one of your hired men. And we do the same things to ourselves, don't we? We say, you know, Richard, you're not worthy. You're not good enough. If people really knew who you are, if they knew the things that you struggle with, if they could see what a hypocrite you are, if they could see what a failure you are, they wouldn't want anything to do with you. You've got to pretend harder. You've got to try harder. On the other side, we can be like the older son who was saying to his father, you know, I've been striving in the field all these years. I've never disobeyed one of your commands. Richard, you preached an amazing message today. Now you're a player in the kingdom of God. Now you've got stature. Now you've got position. Now you've got ability. Now you've got reputation. And there's this self-talk going on. We're either diminishing ourselves or aggrandizing ourselves. There's no sense of rest. We find ourselves on this hamster wheel of either self-aggrandizing and pride or of false humility and a sense of inadequacy. They're both branches on the same tree. But I sensed as I read this passage in John chapter 5 that Father was saying, it's time, Richard, Take up your mat and walk. There's a place of freedom for you. There's a place where you can live and transcend this struggle that you've been having. There is true retirement. I think I tasted something of this some years earlier. When we lived in Penang, we used to regularly go to Chiang Mai in Thailand, to an amazing counselling centre there. Not necessarily for any specific need. We'd often go there simply because it was good to get someone to sort of look into your life from the outside. We usually spend a week meeting with a counsellor. And one time I was there in Chiang Mai, I was in my room, and I realised that in my heart I believed that I was always destined to fail. Whatever endeavour I tried to take on, ultimately it would end up in failure. I realised it wasn't just I'm going to fail. I actually believed in my heart, Richard, you're a failure. I began to think, what can I do about that? How can I change that? Should I borrow some of Nia's lipstick and write on my shaving mirror, Richard, you are an amazing success. And then while I'm shaving in the morning, I can read it out loud and declare it over myself. Richard, you're not a failure. You're an amazing success. I felt Father say to me, Richard, just walk away from it. Don't play that game anymore. It's not, Richard, you're a failure, or Richard, you're a success. Walk away from it. Because Richard, you are my son. Richard, you're my child. Richard, I love you. Walk away from all of your unworthiness. It was John Egan, a high school teacher in the United States, that said this: God is asking me, the unworthy, to forget my unworthiness and that of my brothers, instead daring to advance in the love that has renewed and redeemed us all in God's image. God is asking me, the unworthy, to walk away from my unworthiness. Don't play that game anymore, Richard. It's not that you're unworthy. What you need to know... Thank you, Siri. It's not that you're unworthy, Richard. It's that you are my beloved child. For many of us, me included, we live in a cycle of feeling unworthy, of repentance, of saying sorry, of temporarily being able to come into God's presence until we fail again and condemnation sets in. We feel unworthy, we say sorry, we can temporarily come into God's presence until we fail again, and then we feel condemned and unworthy, inadequate, we say sorry, and we live in this constant cycle of saying sorry, of apologizing for ourselves so that we can feel good enough to come into God's presence. Father's saying, walk away from it. Stop playing the game. It's finished, Richard. Walk away. I mean, we can reflect on it this way. One day, forgiveness is going to cease to exist. One day in the new creation, when Jesus returns, when we enter into the new reality, forgiveness will be obsolete. It will be completely irrelevant, as it was in the beginning in the garden. Before the man and the woman ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, there was absolutely no need for forgiveness. It was irrelevant. That's why it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, love keeps no record of wrongs. It's not a major issue in the heart of God. Jesus said on the cross, didn't he? It is finished. This is done. This is complete. And yet instead we find ourselves coming back to that place. Feeling inadequate, living in shame, living in a sense of inadequacy. One day, forgiveness is going to cease to exist. In the beginning, it was irrelevant. In the new beginning, it will be irrelevant, but actually it's irrelevant now. Now, please don't hear me say something that I didn't say. What Jesus has done for us is amazing. But his work of forgiveness, his work of grace is a complete work. It's a finished work in our hearts once we receive him. About 10 years ago now, a dear, dear friend of ours took his own life. He jumped off an 80-story building, the building adjacent to the one where we were living at that time in Penang. When someone takes their own life, when someone close to you, someone precious, takes their own life, often we can find ourselves struggling with two questions. The first is, why did you do it? Why? Why did you take your own life? The second is there something that I could have done differently that could have made a difference, that might have prevented you from doing this? First question, why did you do it? The second question, is there anything that I could have done to help? Both of these questions have no answer. We can't find an answer to those questions. Neither of them have an immediate solution, an immediate answer. Probably a month or two after this happened, after our friend took his own life, I went down to the place where he would have hit the ground, where when he jumped he would have landed and died. And as I stood there in that place, I just had this awesome sense of the holiness of God. That this was holy ground, where our friend's blood had been poured out, that this was a precious place. And as I stood there thinking about what had happened, I felt Father ask me this. He said, you know those two questions that you've got? Why did you do it, and is there anything I could have done? Well, how are you going to feel about your friend when you see him again? I thought, wow, well, when I see him again, I'm probably going to run right up to him and say, yes, look, isn't this amazing? We're here, we've arrived. And I felt Father ask me, well, are those two questions going to be important in that place? And I thought, no, I probably won't care anymore, probably won't matter. And he asked me this question, well, if they're not going to matter then, do they matter now? If they're not going to matter in eternity, then do they matter now? You see, God's put eternity in our hearts. It's Ecclesiastes 3:11. Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart. But even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end, from beginning to new beginning. We fail to see his completed work in our hearts, that he set us free from condemnation. When I was walking the Camino, often I would walk in silence. Some people would listen to, their iPhone, to music or to what have you, but most of the time I chose to walk in silence. There were occasions when I would listen to an audio book or maybe have a brief telephone conversation with someone. And one time I was walking along listening to one of my favourite authors, Brennan Manning. If you haven't caught by now that I love Brennan Manning's writing, I love Brennan Manning's writing. And I was listening to Abba's Child, fabulous book, and walking along just kind of enjoying the Spanish countryside. And then I heard the reader say these words. They said, "Make the Lord and his immense love for you constitutive of your personal worth. Make the Lord and his immense love for you constitutive of your personal worth. Define yourself radically as one beloved by God. God's love for you and his choice of you constitute your worth. Accept that and let it become the most important thing in your life. Make the Lord and his immense love for you constitutive of your personal worth. Define yourself radically as one beloved by God. God's love for you and his choice of you constitute your value. Accept that and let it become the most important thing in your life. The reader went on through that particular chapter, and then at the end of the chapter he repeated one of the phrases from that original passage. He said again, define yourself radically as one beloved by God. God's love for you and his choice of you constitute your worth. Accept that and let it become the most important thing in your life. And then he added 4 more words. Everything else is illusion. Everything else is illusion. All of the things I do, all of the things I say, all of the things I try to do to build up my own reputation, or to tear myself down, to diminish myself, or to aggrandize myself, all of these things are illusion. All that matters is what Father says about you, of your identity in his heart, who he has seen you to be from the beginning. Everything else is illusion. It's hard to explain what happened to me in that moment, but suddenly it just became crystal clear to me. All of the games that I've played, all of the things that I've said, all of the things that I've done to try and make myself presentable. When people have said things to me or done things that have offended me or have made me feel devalued or unworthy or left out, all of that stuff is illusion. All that matters is my belovedness. All that matters is who my Father sees me to be, because that is the truth. That is reality. Everything else, all of the game playing, all of the competition, all of the comparison, all of the condemnation, all of the striving, all of the ladder climbing, it's all an illusion. It's not real. The only truth is the truth that flows from the Father's heart, from his heart into our hearts. I could see it with such clarity in that moment. I think I'd been beginning to see it for some time, but it was like, you know, that's those seesaws that you get in children's playground. It was like in that moment the seesaw swung the other way. It became real to my heart. I can let go. I can walk away from all of my unworthiness. I can forget my unworthiness and instead dare to advance into the love of God. The impact of that was amazing. There's another moment I'll perhaps talk about in another one of these reflections where I just danced and jumped and ran and skipped and shouted for joy. It's a new day. It's a new day. It's a new reality. I don't have to, I can retire. Yes. I can be free. You know, as I got close to Santiago, most of the time when I was walking, I wasn't thinking about the end. I wasn't, you know, the end is the end is hundreds of kilometers away. All I need to think about is today, where I'm going to walk today. And when I get hungry, I'll have a meal. When I get tired, I'll find somewhere to sleep. But in the last few days, once I got down to the last 100 kilometers, I did begin to think about what it's going to mean to arrive in Santiago after this long journey. And began to think about what that might look like. And I was talking to Nia on the phone. I said, maybe I can arrive with a group of people, maybe there's a group I can, so that I can have a kind of corporate experience of this. And Nia said one phrase: is that what you're supposed to do? Are you supposed to arrive with a group? My wife has a habit of dropping little bombs. Anyway, I couldn't shake this phrase off. What am I supposed to do? And I thought, oh, yeah, Father, I came here to Spain to walk with you. I'm not supposed to walk into Santiago with a group of other people. I'm supposed to walk down to the cathedral with you, Father and Son. And so when the day did arrive, I walked over 40 kilometers that day, and towards the end of the day, as I approached the city and then the city centre, there was a group of 3 girls that I came across, and I walked with them for a while. And as we began to get close to the cathedral, I could see the spires of the cathedral in the distance. I just dropped back from that group and thought, no, I'm going to walk on my own. And usually as you come round and down into the massive courtyard, it's about the size of 3 football pitches, in front of the cathedral, it will be teeming with people, teeming with other pilgrims, people welcoming you, slapping you on the back, hugging you, congratulating you on your achievement. But as I walked down, it was a beautiful sunny day, as I walked with Father into the courtyard, there were about 12 people in the whole courtyard, just a small group in the middle and a couple of people dotted around the edges. And as I said before, as I came into the courtyard, I just burst into tears. Just deep. I don't know if I've ever sobbed that hard. Just the day before I arrived, Father said this to me. He said, "Richard, you've been walking this walk for the last 30 odd days. You've been carrying this backpack for the last 33 days. But there's another backpack that you've been carrying for 53 years. Another backpack, a heavy burden. And when you arrive in Santiago tomorrow and you take off your backpack, I want to take that other backpack from you. All of your striving, all of your competition, all of your comparison, all of the self-talk, all of the self-diminishing and the self-aggrandizing, it's ending tomorrow. I'm going to take that from you." And so as I came down, round through the tunnel beside the cathedral and into the main square, that sense of tangible relief was absolutely overwhelming. I still, even now, don't fully understand everything that was happening, but I just knew there is something shifting in me right now, a significant transaction in the spirit, and I'm never going to be the same again. No, I still occasionally struggle with those things, but now it's just an illusion. This isn't real. I want to step into my belovedness, to feed from the tree of life, not the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. To feed from the tree of life is to live loved, is to live in our belovedness. In his book, The Life of the Beloved, Henri Nouwen says this: "All I want to say to you is you are the beloved. And all I hope is that you can hear these words as spoken to you with all the tenderness and force that love can hold. My only desire is to make these words reverberate in every corner of your being. You are the beloved." He is, of course, reflecting on Jesus' baptism in the Jordan, when Jesus heard those words from heaven: "You're my Son, whom I love, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased. My only desire is to make these words reverberate in every corner of your being. You are the beloved." The inward longing to know who we really are is the source of all of our discontent. The inward desire, the inward hunger to discover our true identity is the source of all discontent, is the source of all restlessness and striving and frustration, of shame and condemnation and competition. To step into our belovedness is to find divine rest in the arms of a loving Father. In Revelation 2 verse 17 it says, "To the one who is victorious, I will give some of the hidden manna. I will also give that person a white stone with a new name on it, known only to the one who receives it. I will also give that person a white stone with a new name on it, known only to the one who receives it." I am the beloved. You are the beloved.